The gospel reading today is from Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The word of the Lord. Well, yesterday, or a Friday, I journeyed up to Mount Angel, and it was a beautiful day. We have a group of close to 25 from our church and from our community at our spiritual life retreat at Mount Angel, including Reverend Sharon Edwards, who is there as well. And I went up to join them just for Friday evening in the opening and to see it. And it was a beautiful day, and on my way there, you could see Mount Hood. I thought it was Mount Jefferson, but then I was corrected. I didn't think you could see Mount Hood from so far, and it was just brilliant towards the end of the day, so the setting sun was lighting it up brilliantly. It was just a beautiful day to be up there on the mountain to go to this Mount Angel, which is a much smaller mountain than Mount Hood, but it's still up and above and with beautiful views of the valleys below. And mountains have always had their allure to me. I've done, way back when, I did some trips to Mount Shasta, to climb Mount Shasta, did some backpacking and some mountaineering in Colorado. Nothing too technical, but it was this drive to top and get on top of 14,000, there's this 14,000 foot club trying to get all the 14,000 foot peaks. I'm nowhere near getting to all of them. But there's this allure to the climbing the mountain, to getting above and seeing and being above it all and conquering the mountain. And many people have their different reasons of why they like to climb mountains. For Peter and for the disciples and in Jesus' time, the mountains were significant as well. And people would come to the mountains and they would build temples on top of them. And they belonged, and different mountains belonged to different religions and different people groups. And everywhere you went, not just in Hebrew culture, but in Greek culture and in Roman culture, mountains had their significance of where you went to encounter the divine, to get up above it all, to build a temple, to enshrine God, and to worship God. We like our mountains. We like going up there. And as we heard in the Exodus passage, Moses went up to the mountain and from a cloud was there for 40 days when he came down with the law, the 10 Commandments, the beginning of the law for the people of Israel. And it was at that mountain where Moses had that encounter, one of a few encounters that Moses had on mountains. It's the mountains and the allure of the mountains to get up and meet God and to have this separate space out of ordinary life and to have this experience where God will reveal who God is to us, or where we may encounter God. I think that Peter and the disciples were called by Jesus, had a different idea of what Jesus had come to do. That Jesus had come to be this Messiah who would usher in a new kingdom, raised up and powerful, and would usher in a new reign of godly people and of a godly rule, unlike the one they had seen in their lives, unlike the oppression and the inequality that they found under Roman rule. And unlike the inequality and unjustness of even their own temple and religious systems that created outcasts, some were in and some were out. Peter and the disciples were ordinary people who lived in this mucky world where they saw a lot of hard things happen, and where they wanted to rise up and have God rise us up out of the world. And that was becoming very true just before this passage when Jesus said that he would be suffering, that he would die. And this was not the Jesus that they had in mind, not the Messiah that they had in mind, that Jesus would actually, first of all, taking him around to all these people who had so many needs, who were so different, who were possessed and who were sick and who were just broken, and it was a hard place to walk for them day in and day out, and they maybe were losing sight of and faith in Jesus and what he had come to do. And they wanted the Messiah. They wanted the Messiah to come in and usher something different. And then Jesus starts talking about suffering and dying, and you may know this, the scripture where Peter rebukes Jesus and says, no, that cannot happen. And then Jesus rebukes him back and says, get behind me, Satan. So Peter's probably feeling a little dejected that he's been challenged, that his perception of who Jesus is and what Jesus came to do is not meeting his expectation. So I think Peter might have been a little excited when Jesus led him up that mountain, because it would have been known that going up to the mountain was going to be a holy and sacred experience. And Peter got his wish. As it says, there's this cloud that appears. There's this bright light of Jesus just shining. And there are Elijah and there's Moses, and they're all together. And clearly something new is happening here. And Peter was excited, and he said, this is good. This isn't like what we have been doing down there with people in the mess of the world. This is pure and holy. This is the God that we want and we crave and want to see. Let's enshrine you, Jesus and Moses, and let's build these tabernacles, and let's keep you here. It's good to be up here on the mountain. We want to be on the mountain. And you may know that I worked at summer camp, and I saw a lot of mountaintop experiences of the Christian camp where kids get together out of the rough worlds that they come from, some of them very difficult family lives that we'd hear about, very difficult to be a kid in school. And they come together with other Christians and they worship, and everyone's nice to each other mostly, and they have this mountaintop experience of God being good. And then you get a few days in, and they get closer to when they have to go home, and they just break down. They think about how they have to go back down the mountain. They want to stay there. And for many of them, camp was like a religion for them, just getting to camp and wanting to be there all the time. And they work so hard, and then they volunteer, and then they become staff, because up there they're protected, they're insulated, they're in a community that is more loving than the one that they know or they come from, and they like it and want to stay there. And us too, with our faith and our church, we can build our worship around an insulating barrier from whatever our lives are out there. It can be a place of sanctuary, of experience, of holiness, and we like it, but eventually we have to go back into the world. And Jesus and God shines through this cloud, just as God shined through the cloud to Moses. Moses was given the law, but here Peter is interrupted by God. And God says, oh no, no, Peter. Jesus is not about building another temple on another mountain that can look down on everything else and say, this is the right mountain. Jesus is the one who goes down from the mountain and is going to lead you down into the world, to be a God who walks with us in the valleys, walks with us in the everyday, who is present with us and through one another to face the hard realities that we all face in this world. We get up on that mountain and we are exposed for what we long for and what we're afraid of. And Peter is exposed for his fears. If any of you have been on a high mountain, you know, just get 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet, it gets really hard. There's not much oxygen up there. And your legs feel like they're 100 pounds. And there was one time when I was about 12,000 feet and had another couple thousand feet to go, and it was this mental battle. It's like, you just can't do this. You don't have what it takes, and you just need to turn around and go back. And each step was painful, and it seemed like it was going to take all night, up till all night to get up there. And you're exposed, and you start feeling doubt, and you don't know that you can make it on a physical level, but even emotionally and mental, as that oxygen-starved brain plays tricks on you. You really start to doubt yourself. But we can have those moments in our faith, too, in our lives, that the ideals we have for our lives and what we thought with the mountains we set for ourselves and how we were climbing, or the God that we know, that we somehow just cannot make it to the mountaintop, or we cannot be good enough or successful enough or popular enough or rich enough in our lives, and we are exposed for our fears of what if those things don't happen? What if those ideals we set up for God or for our lives don't turn out to be ones that are sustainable, that we can stay in? What are those things that we're avoiding or wanting to rise up above and keep from facing? And God says, "This is my son, listen to him." And then it's all gone. And it's just Jesus, the human Jesus. I don't think he's shining at that point. And he touches them and he says, "Come on, let's get up. Don't be afraid." It takes them down the mountain. God transfigures our faith from one where we are just handed laws from the mountain to one where we're giving a very presence of God to walk with us in our everyday life down the mountain. A God who will walk with us, who will help us face the chaos and ugliness and hard and the suffering in our lives, who will help us face those challenging parts of our lives, help us live the life we actually have other than the ideal we think we should have, to walk with us and face life one step at a time. This is a transfigured faith. One that is nourished by this meal, one where Jesus breaks bread and says, "This is my body broken for you." In a broken world, I am broken with you, and I am with you every step of the way. And not just in some spiritual sense, but through this body, through others who follow the way of Christ step by step, who allow love and unconditional love of God to flow through us and to love others. And so we come down off our mountains and we go out into the world to serve as people of Christ, people of God. In 2 weeks, we will have this potluck at 5:30 for volunteers, and we didn't want to just recognize volunteers in the church, although just about everybody here has volunteered in some way, but also to recognize that it's not just all about what we do in here, but sending people out into the world. And many of you are volunteers out in other agencies and other ways in our community. And that is really the purpose of what we do here, is to worship God, to have a sense of the holy with us, but also to be fed and strengthened to go out into our everyday lives, into our community, and into the world, being people of God, being people of the way, of a compassionate Christ who brings mercy and healing and justice to the world. And so we can have our mountaintop experiences, that's okay, but we're not meant to stay there. We're called to come down the mountain, to follow the one who has named us as God's beloved. Thanks be to God. Amen.